Oshkosh, Wisconsin, recognized throughout the world for the Experimental Aircraft Association, the home of sport aviation, a touchstone for those whose career or hobby involves flight. It is a place on the cutting edge of aviation, a melting pot of innovation and advancement. Time is marked differently here. It's measured from August to August and culminates when Oshkosh's Whitman Regional Airport hosts the annual EAA Fly-In Convention. The fruits of a year's labor are collected and celebrated. What kind of year was 1992? It was a year of the GB and the Connie, of tributes to World War II aces and glider pilots, and Doolittle Raiders and Tuskegee Airmen, of sensational feats and incredible discoveries, of young eagles and old favorites, and of a record number of show planes. It was another year to add a tradition of excellence in aviation. A theme that was to weave its way throughout EAA Oshkosh 92 was that of the role of young people in aviation. Nowhere was this more evident than in the kickoff of EAA's ambitious Young Eagles program. The concept is simple: get youngsters interested in aviation by getting them up in the air.
It is EAA's membership goal to give 1 million kids an airplane ride starting today at Oshkosh 92, with the concluding at Oshkosh in the year 2003. That date is significant because 2003 is the 100th anniversary of powered flight, the 50th anniversary of EAA.
For the next decade, EAA chapters will hold flight rallies, and individual members will be encouraged to provide the experience of flight to young people throughout the world. Inaugural flights took place during the week of convention and featured special guest Cliff Robertson, honorary chairman of the program. Every area of EAA participated, and by the end of the fly-in, 142 youngsters had received certificates proclaiming them Young Eagles.
This is my first time in an airplane, and it's way cool.
Today I went flying in a Piper Cub, and it was great. Yeah! I don't really have plans yet. Only plan I have is I want to be a pilot.
In conjunction with the program was the creation of a special movie entitled Young Eagle. The film, starring Robertson, is featured in the Air Adventure Museum in Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
Okay, kid. I already got the throttle set. Now, when I say contact, you turn on that switch, okay? Okay, contact.
Contact, I think.
Now grab the stick.
Hey, this is awesome.
Jenny don't take to just everybody, just to those who appreciate her.
Possibly the most important announcement at the fly-in was the introduction of the Small Aircraft Certification Compliance Program. This program opens the door for the production of light aircraft to be used as trainers. 13 aircraft and engine manufacturers submitted applications to begin the certification process. EAA is proud to be partners with FAA and the Sport Aircraft Manufacturers Association in this cooperative effort. Australia, South Africa, Russia, and 70 other countries. The convention brings together people from all walks of life and from all corners of the globe. The International Parade of Visitors is an impressive testament to the worldwide appeal of aviation. And this year, it was dominated by 397 enthusiastic supporters from the land down under. This contingent from Australia made their third appearance at EAA Oshkosh, arriving in a Qantas 747 piloted by Captain Trevor Jensen.
I think it's quite exciting. You know, EAA and the Oshkosh in particular is one of the outstanding events. And our association with it from Australia, now it's the third time we've been here. It's becoming a little bit of a part of the act, I hope. And I hope it will continue to come.
In contrast to the direct route taken by the 747 is the journey of South African pilots Charles Chalky Stobart and Peter Hengst. Their arrival in a 1941 Fairchild 24W set a new record for distance flown to a convention. 9,900 miles in 125 hours. Johannesburg to Oshkosh, via Africa, Europe, Iceland, Greenland, and Canada.
When we were planning it, lots of people tried to talk us out of it. You know, because of the obvious dangers of flying a very old aircraft long distances and over vast expanses of sea. My personal opinion is that if you do not trust your aircraft, then don't even take it around the patch. You know, you have as much chance of an engine failure then. And then also, it was suggested that we rather containerize the aircraft, ship it to some eastern board place in the United States and then fly to Oshkosh. Sure, anybody can do that. That's too easy. So we did it the good old-fashioned way. And we enjoyed it. No regrets.
Russian aviation and aerospace representatives, including cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev, were met with enthusiasm during the convention. Krikalev was stranded in space following the collapse of the communist government. He remained in orbit on the Mir space station for almost 1 year and continued his scientific work. Sergei hopes that the new political climate in Russia will lead to joint space missions between his country and America in the future. Homebuilder Viktor Dmitriev and his 110-pound suitcase airplane were on hand in the ultralight area. Victor's micro airplane is his 30th design in the last 24 years. He purposely focused on miniature aircraft because good materials were hard to come by in the Soviet Union. Another Russian innovation, the new two-place Sukhoi Su-29, tore through the skies during showcase and air show exhibitions. The Sukhoi, developed in 1983 for the USSR aerobatic team, was the first Russian aircraft to be exported to the West. Like the single-place Su-26, introduced to this country in 1989, the Su-29 delivers impressive power and agility. The showcase taxiway on the main ramp is the hub for activities held throughout the day. It's a starting point for air show proceedings and an important exhibit way for displaying aircraft. 2 of 3 flying constellations flew during EAA Oshkosh 92. This military air transport service, Connie, was joined by the Star of America for flybys during the showcase portion of the daily air show. The Star of America arrived by means of celestial navigation, an almost forgotten art of using an octant to navigate by the sun, moon, and stars. In its heyday, the Constellation was a versatile military and commercial aircraft, the ultimate piston-engined airliner. Engineered by Lockheed under the direction of millionaire Howard Hughes, the triple-tailed Connie first flew on January 9, 1943. On April 17, 1944, a new transcontinental record of 6 hours, 58 minutes, and 51 seconds was set in a Connie flown by Hughes and TWA President Jack Fry. On one leg of the return trip, Orville Wright sat in the co-pilot seat. In addition to its famous commercial status, Connies were also used by the military from World War II through Vietnam, and a Constellation served as President Eisenhower's Air Force One. Production ceased in 1959 after more than 850 of these magnificent airplanes were built. Elmer Ward's Gulf Hawk 4 stood at the western edge of the showcase taxiway. It's painted in the color scheme of the late Al Williams Grumman G-58A Bearcat, one of only 2 civilian Bearcats ever produced. Williams, as shown here in the Gulf Hawk 2, a Grumman G-22, was one of the greatest air show performers of the Depression era. He won the 1923 Pulitzer Trophy race, setting a world speed record at the same time. Williams was also instrumental in developing the technique of dive bombing.
He trained himself in aerobatics over the Gulf of Mexico as a Navy pilot in World War I. He soloed in 2 hours, became an instructor in 20 hours, and in somewhere in the region of 50 to 70 hours, he could take on any pilot in the country. And he taught himself this by chasing gulls over the Gulf of Mexico. So he called himself the Gulf Hawk, and he would watch what the gulls did to avoid him, and then he would try to duplicate that maneuver.
Occupying a tent on the south side of the taxiway was EAA Oshkosh's strangest visitor. Pieces of a P-38 that had spent the last 50 years under nearly 250 feet of ice. In 1981, aviation service owner Pat Epps and architect Richard Taylor were instrumental in forming the Greenland Expedition Society. This group is dedicated to the recovery and rebuilding of the aircraft known as the Lost Squadron.
Here in the tent, we have as much of the fighter plane as we could put in the DC-3 cargo plane. And this was loaded up last Monday from the ice cap and flown directly here to Oshkosh. So we only have one engine. The other engine is in Greenland. We have both booms and the rudder assemblies, one wing panel. The rest, and the center section, the most important section, has just been brought up to the ice cap, to the surface of the ice cap, and it's now retrievable. So we have perhaps 40% of the aircraft here.
On July 15, 1942, 2 B-17s and 6 P-38s left Greenland for delivery to England as part of Operation Bolero. Bad weather and misleading radio transmission, most likely from a German U-boat, forced the group to land in southeastern Greenland, 10 miles from the coast. All 25 crew members were rescued, but the aircraft, 7 of which had sustained only minor damage, were left behind. After several expeditions to the site, the Lost Squadron was finally located, buried under a half-century of snow and ice. A specially constructed device called the Super Gopher melted an access shaft more than 20 stories deep to the B-17 Big Stoop. Unfortunately, the weight of the shifting ice had crushed the aircraft, although several pieces were brought to the surface. A new shaft was sunk to one of the P-38s, which proved to be in better condition. Future plans for the Society include restoring the P-38 to flying condition and a return to the ice of Greenland. A site that brought back memories of the 1930s was Delmar Benjamin's GBR-2. This replica of the famous Granville Brothers airplane is a little less than a year old. The original was constructed to compete in the Bendix cross-country race and was the sister ship of the famous GBR-1, which was flown by Jimmy Doolittle to a Thompson Trophy victory in 1932. The GBs gained a reputation as being sensitive machines to fly. Delmar agrees that it's in a class of its own.
It flies like a GB, and there's no other airplane that I could compare to it. The S1 Pitts is probably the closest as far as the gear track and the short fuselage. And I've got 3,000 hours in a Pitts Special, and I'd estimate that this airplane is 4 times more sensitive than a Pitts Special on landing and in the air. Jimmy Doolittle said it was like balancing a pencil on your fingertip, and I would agree with that.
The wingspan of the R2 is a short 25 feet, with an area of only 100 square feet. The replica was kept to as close to original specifications as possible.
The only modifications I've done is inverted fuel and a flop tube in the oil tank so that I can fly upside down. And my main goal was to find out actually what a 1932 GB flew like. So I built it exactly, aerodynamically, it's exactly as the original. Structurally, it's exactly as the original. The original was designed for 14 Gs at 450 miles an hour, and that's plenty strong enough airplane for me.
There are many more airplanes to discover at EAA Oshkosh than can fit on the showcase taxiway. The strength of EAA is in the diversity of the aircraft that visit the convention, from home-builts to vintage aircraft, warbirds to ultralights, rotorcraft, and light planes. The variety is evident along the entire length of the convention grounds and in the air above it. Steve Pitcairn continues the famous legacy started by his father, Harold, with the restoration of this 1930 Pitcairn PA-7 mail wing, the reserve grand champion winner in the antique class. Harold Pitcairn designed the PA-7 as the third in his line of mail transports. The series was built under contract to the U.S. Post Office Department for the optimum in speed and safety in delivery of the mail.
I bought this airplane in 1981. It came out of a gentleman's hangar in Minnesota, and it was virtually a basket case. As you can see, there's a mail compartment up front. That's where they carry the mail. There was a big metal bin in there so you could get to nothing. Consequently, they put a zipper down the side so that your hydraulic lines and oil lines and throttle controls all come down the side here and go into the instrument panel, and that's where we inspected them. The Pitcairn arrow, this was the Pitcairn logo, was on all our airplanes. And the U.S. mail, contract airmail 19. Back in the 1928, the government was carrying mail in Army airplanes, and they decided to do it through private contractors. So they put out bids. My dad won the bid for contract 19, which was from New York to Atlanta.
Jim Evans chose the Long EZ as a home-built project after flying a rental airplane to his first convention a decade ago.
Last year we came to Oshkosh by way of South Dakota. This year we came to Oshkosh by way of Central Ontario, and we camp with it a lot. And it's just our way of taking vacations and getting around. We're just really grateful that the laws in this country allow us to fly around like we do, because traveling around here, I've met a lot of people from different countries, and they don't have near the freedom we do, and we're just really grateful for that.
North American T-28 Trojans played an important role in the Warbird segment of the air show. Built as a post-World War II trainer for the Air Force and Navy, the Trojan was the successor to the T-6 Texan. This T-28, owned by John Morgan of Rockville, Illinois, was the 1992 Warbird Grand Champion. James Rollison restored this 1948 Cessna 195 with his father, James Sr. While all airplanes are loved by their owners, this fine classic holds special memories for Jim.
We restored the airplane 6 years ago, my father and I, and then I brought the airplane back here on my honeymoon. We got married and had the airplane right next to where we got married, and came back here and spent our honeymoon at Oshkosh, 1986.
When Eric Wallner brought his first ultralight to Oshkosh in 1978, it was one of only 28 at the convention. Eric's Volite Easy Riser brings this year's total to 170.
This plane is an offshoot of the original Easy Riser design, of which there were about 3,000 airplanes sold and nearly built, I would guess. And it's called a Volite riser because there's about 30 different modifications to it as compared to the original Easy Riser design. And if you see a film of it taking off or see it in person, the plane will come up onto a step, more or less, and the plane will actually slingshot through the air at that point. There's very little resistance on the airframe. And once I'm up to about 20 to 50 feet, I swing my feet up, get in the harness, and then throttle back to probably 3/4 or half throttle and continue climbing out and enjoy the flight.
One of the largest annual increases in aircraft attendance occurred this year, and here's one example why. The introduction of a contemporary class for those airplanes produced between 1956 and 1960. This Comanche was one of 151 contemporaries registered at the convention. The contemporary class will be eligible for judging next year. The plans-built Grand Champion was this Kinner-powered Hatz, owned by Steve Lund. Steve modified the Hatz by using the Kinner engine and 1930s-style landing gear to give the airplane an antique feel.
Well, this project has probably been the greatest learning experience I've ever had. You learn so many skills, and it's a lot of fun. Sometimes you think you're never going to get it done, but the trick there is to look at one system in that airplane and build that system. When you get done with that one, then you can move on to the next system or the next part of the airplane, whatever. If you look at the whole project from one end to the other, sometimes it gets overwhelming. So just take one piece at a time.
To many, this would be the ultimate dream in home builds, a kit jet designed for supersonic speeds. Jim Beatty's BD-10 jet was on display at Oshkosh 92.
The airplane was designed specifically for amateur pilots to fly, and specifically for home builders to build and to fly. The end result is we have an airplane here which can perform just as well as many fighter aircraft can. It is all metal, it's pressurized, it has an air conditioning unit, it can go to 45,000 feet. And since it has a great deal of thrust for its weight, we knew it was capable of going supersonic. So we had to integrate the supersonic design parameters into it, and we feel this airplane will be capable of doing Mach 1.4 at 45,000 feet.
Barney Peterson's Fokker D7 is powered by a modified Ranger engine. This full-size replica took 4.5 years to complete. Each patch in the camouflage paint scheme was masked and painted separately. The aircraft flew for the first time earlier this year. Barney was inspired both by his childhood interest in model Fokkers and the fact that his father was a mechanic in the United States Air Service during World War I. Myron Jenkins' Glass Air 3 took home the honors of custom-built Grand Champion, the 6th award the airplane has earned in the past year. Myron built his first project, a Glass Air RG, before he even gained his pilot's license.
This 3 is even a better airplane. It's proven out to be, engineering-wise, a better airplane. And I wanted more room. I wanted a little more space. My wife wanted a little more baggage room. And I want a little more speed.
Debuting at Oshkosh this year were many new designs, including the Pegasus Air stall, the Lancer ES, the newest addition to the Kit Fox family, the versatile tricycle gear Vixen, and the Rand's S11 Pursuit.
As you can see, looking at the Pursuit's plan form from a top view, you would see a very much a delta shape, or what we'd call a lifting body. And the wing and the body of the aircraft are one and the same. They blend together. And this results in a low-stress aircraft because the whole entire aircraft flies. You know, there's no part on it that's not lifting, and the entire surface does fly. So in a sense, it's a lot like a flying wing, but yet it handles like a conventional aircraft.
The Dragonfly, designed by Robert Bailey with input from Australian Bill Moyes, was also a first-time visitor to Oshkosh. The Dragonfly's slow speed capabilities and large control surfaces make it the perfect tow plane for hang gliders. Other applications include sheep herding and crop dusting in Australia. This Aeronca 11cc Super Chief is one of several aircraft we've seen so far that have been singled out for special merit. Denzel Williams was aided by almost 70 members of Chapter 304, and the result is a Grand Champion winner in the Classic division.
This is the Aeronca Super Chief. It's 85 horsepower, side by side, and it has tow brakes. And what sets it apart from most of the other Aeronicas is it has a balanced elevator. Well, it took a total of 5 years, over a 5-year period, to restore the aircraft. I guess the main thing was that finding the parts, the original parts for it, other than the covering, the wings and the fuselage, to get it to look like as it does now.
Taking home the Grand Champion honors in the other categories were Jim Porter of Hinsdale, Illinois, for his antique 1943 Beech D-17S Stagger Wing. Bill Myers Rotorway Exec Rotorcraft from Jacksonville, Florida. This Kolb Mark III Twin Star light plane, owned by Daniel Bauman of Kent City, Michigan. And in the ultralight division, this Kolb Ultra Star, owned by KZ Zygaitis of Fenton, Missouri. KZ was also instrumental in organizing the Spirit of Adventure Flight 92 at this year's convention. 34 ultralights and light planes arrived from the Dodge County Airport in Juneau, Wisconsin, the last leg of an 11-stop flight begun in Metropolis, Illinois. With the convention grounds stretching from ultralights on the south end to warbirds on the north, there are enough aircraft to cover the full scope of aviation interest. These aircraft, along with the Grand Champions and other featured airplanes, were only a handful of the thousands waiting to be discovered at Oshkosh 92. Many more of the convention's greatest, including John Eichmeyer's Pit Special, will be featured throughout the next year on the covers and in the pages of Sport Aviation, as well as EAA's other magazines. Each year, EAAers take time out from admiring aircraft to recognize the many people who have contributed to the field of aviation. People like Jim Ray, recipient of this year's Freedom of Flight Award, EAA's premier honor. Aviation pioneer Jimmy Doolittle, who received the EAA Milwaukee School of Engineering Award. And of course, the many government agencies and representatives who visit the convention each year. The United States Customs Service was just one of the aviation-related agencies with exhibits at EAA Oshkosh. This Cessna Citation II is used in the apprehension of drug traffickers. Massive crowds turned out for the many tributes to those who served their country during World War II. Display tents and Theater in the Woods programs were hosted for glider pilots, Tuskegee Airmen, Doolittle Raiders, and 5 aces of the 357 Fighter Group. 6 of the original 80 members of the Doolittle Raiders were present to celebrate the 50th anniversary of their daring raid on Japan. Flying Magazine sponsored a tent display, highlighted by daily presentations by individual raiders. On April 18, 1942, one of the boldest military operations of the Second World War was initiated. 79 men, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel James Jimmy Doolittle, conducted a daylight attack on Japan in 16 B-25s launched from the aircraft carrier USS Hornet.
Doolittle ran his engines up. I was sitting right behind him. Had it warming up. He had his up to full power. The Navy had the carrier up to full power, right into the wind and the gust. So the carrier was shaking and my airplane was shaking from the prop wash. I looked around, my crew was shaking. Well, when I got rolled across the end of the deck, everything seemed to be going fine until I got right over the bow, and I got a tremendous gust of bow wash. It pitched my aircraft up at a very high rakish angle, so I hollered at my co-pilot. I called him Foggy, and I said, "Foggy, help me get this nose down." We had to stiff arm it down because we'd already trimmed the airplane full tail heavy, which is what we had been trained to do in doing it on the runways. Well, a fellow, I was making a little presentation this morning, and a guy asked me a question when we got to the question session, and he said, "I'll bet you used some expletives and some real adjectives when you asked him to help you with that." And I said, "No, didn't have time."
The bombing raid itself was for the most part uneventful, and the Japanese were caught totally unprepared. It was the second part of the mission, the journey home, that proved costly.
Of the 16 airplanes, the one landed in Russia, 15 of them crashed or bailed out. 11 crews bailed out, 4 crews crashed. Our crew happened to be one that bailed out. We went through this tremendous storm, but with the storm was a very, very high tailwind, and that's what really got us into the mainland. But we ran out of gas. The right engine had already quit. We feathered it. Of course, the decision was made, we've got to bail. And that's what we did.
The raid that boosted the morale of America was vividly recreated during Sunday and Tuesday's air shows, with 9 B-25s participating. A C-5A transport brought representatives of the Tuskegee Airmen and their families to the convention to participate in events sponsored by McDonald's and the Coca-Cola Company. America's black soldiers fought 2 wars simultaneously, one against the Axis and one against prejudice at home. The program designed to train black pilots was named the Tuskegee Experiment, because an Army War College study conducted during the 1920s had concluded that blacks could not be taught to fly, and if a few could, they would surely crumble under battle conditions. Sadly, though the Tuskegee Airmen proved themselves time and again, prejudice would dog them in one form or another, even after President Truman integrated the military in 1949.
We went into combat and against adverse conditions there. Until we proved ourselves, we were not given the best ships, we were not given the best assignments, but they proved it. And we were aware of the Executive Order 210-10, paragraph A and B, that was promulgated by the President of the United States, and it said there would be no segregation on any Army, Navy, Marines, or Coast Guard facility. So when we were moved from one facility to the other facility, we, and I say the collective, we decided that we would test that order, and we would test it peacefully.
The airmen were organized as the 99th Pursuit Squadron and began a distinguished career over North Africa and Italy. The 99th was later joined by 3 other units to form the 332nd Fighter Group under the command of Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. Davis was the first black to graduate from West Point in this century. He later became the first black lieutenant general in the U.S. Air Force.
The Tuskegee Airmen participated successfully in that war, and they demonstrated to all concerned that they deserved all of the honors of citizenship, that they were not unintelligent as they had been rumored to be, but instead they were courageous American citizens who wanted to do their duty in a manner that would be helpful to their country.
Glider pilots flew engineless aircraft and carried assault troops, supplies, and heavy equipment on a one-way trip into the heart of battle. They are an almost forgotten but very special breed. Located just inside the main gate was the glider tent, easily accessible to everyone attending the convention. Displays included a partially reconstructed CG-4A glider, as well as seminars and other memorabilia of the era.
The mission that I flew on was the last mission in Europe, so it's the only practical experience I had. It was a typical airborne assault over enemy lines where huge trains of gliders and tow ships crossed the Rhine, preceded by paratroops that went in to secure the land.
I was shot in the right forearm when I was off the tow in a CG-4A glider with 13 airborne troops coming in for a landing over the Rhine River on March 24th of 1945. I got a gunshot wound to the right forearm with a rifle bullet, at which time my arm went numb and I called over to my co-pilot to take over, but it was his first time in combat and he was frozen. I reached up and pulled the spoiler with my left hand and held it up with my left knee and landed the glider with my left hand and my right foot. We made a good landing. We all got out.
The fourth and final tribute to the heroes of World War II was given to 5 aces of the 357th Fighter Group, or the Yoxford Boys as they were known. Together, for the first time since the end of the war, the group, which included Chuck Yeager, the first person to break the sound barrier, arrived in P-51 Mustangs painted to resemble their wartime airplanes. Richard Pete Peterson in Charles Osborne's Hurry Home, Honey. Tommy Hayes in Jim Beasley Jr.'s Frenesy. Leonard Kit Carson in Nookie Bookie 4, owned by Paul Romaine. Yeager in Glamorous Glen 3, owned by Gary Honbarrier. And Bud Anderson in Steve Collins' Old Boy, since Old Crow, the mock-up of Anderson's airplane, owned by Mickey Rupp, was unavailable. Throughout their visit, the aces spent as much time as possible in their aircraft. And who could blame them?
It's really neat to come up here to Oshkosh with the warbirds and fly airplanes like this we did in World War II. It just gives you a real feeling because the pilots that I'm flying with, Bud Anderson, Pete Peterson, Tommy Hayes, and guys like that, we were all combat pilots in 43 and 44 flying against the Germans. It was neat.
When the 5 weren't flying, they were meeting the public individually and at a conference held on the Showcase Taxiway, moderated by the former host of Good Morning America, David Hartman.
Interestingly enough, in reading about the history of the 357th, I was looking at the dates because you can read down day by day and read the entire record in great detail of what the squadrons of the group did. And I came to the date 19 May 1944. And that hit me because that was my 9th birthday. And when I have spent time with these gentlemen over the past few days and gotten to fly with them and realized that each of these men was either 20, 21, or 22 years old when they were in combat over Europe. And I was 9. They weren't that much older than me. I mean, I look at them now, we're in pretty similar territory. But there was a big difference between being 9 in the 4th grade and flying combat over Europe.
Hartman also hosted the group's appearance at Theater in the Woods, a gathering that shattered previous attendance records. For many visitors to the convention, the afternoon air shows provide the peak experience of the daytime activities. Warbird salutes to the heroes of World War II shared the sky with the finest air show routines in the world. With the sky above Oshkosh now safe from attack, the crowds relax and enjoy the ultimate excellence in aviation. It's not just high-profile activities like the air show that lure people to the convention. A unique change of pace can be found at the seaplane base. The relaxed atmosphere of the base, located on the shores of Lake Winnebago, is the perfect place to do some float plane flying, especially given the ample supply of fine weather during the 1992 convention. To the east of the convention grounds stands the EAA Air Adventure Museum, home to an impressive collection of aircraft. A year-round attraction, the museum sees a distinct increase in attendance during the fly-in. The museum provides a stage for numerous forums and lectures open to the general public as well as EAAers. On display at EAA Oshkosh 92 were several of the 9 aircraft from the Combat Jets Flying Museum, donated to the EAA Aviation Foundation earlier this year. Among the jets flying during the air show were a MiG-21 and an F-104. This year, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration celebrated the 75th anniversary of its Langley Research Center during EAA Oshkosh.
This nation has always had the power to be anything we choose to be. All it takes is the will to do it. Today's NASA has the will and the commitment, and we intend to work with the people of the United States of America to lead the way.
Engineers at Langley have been directly responsible for countless innovations in aeronautics, including drag reduction on airplanes of the Second World War and the development of the first supersonic aircraft. The test facility staff handled the training of the first manned space expedition, Project Mercury, and continue today with the Space Shuttle program. Shuttle astronaut Bonnie Dunbar fresh from a mission on the Columbia, reveals some of NASA's plans for the next century.
Space Station Freedom's our next generation of space flight beyond the shuttle. Going into the next century, it will not only benefit those views of the Earth, microgravity, and space, it will push aerospace technology for this country up to the next level.
From recent conquests of space to reminders of early triumphs in the air, whatever you were looking for, EAA Oshkosh 92 delivered. What kind of a year was it? It was a year of surprises, discoveries, thrills, and delights. Miracles, breakthroughs, spectacles, and excitement. Most importantly, it was a year of possibilities and a promise for the future.
In addition to excellence in aviation, 2 EAA Oshkosh 92 companion videos are also available. Oshkosh Remembers the Heroes of World War II expands upon the coverage of the 4 World War II tributes featured in this program. You'll relive the famous Doolittle raid on Tokyo, hear first-hand accounts from the aces of the 357th Fighter Group, learn about the unsung role of the glider pilot, and discover how the Tuskegee Airmen worked to remove segregation in the Army Air Corps. It's a rare and vivid picture of history as seen through the eyes of those involved. In the second video, the 357th Fighter Aces reunite at EAA Oshkosh. You'll witness the incredible Theater in the Woods presentation hosted by David Hartman and starring 5 World War II aces, including Chuck Yeager. If you were there, you'll want a keepsake of a magical evening. And if you missed out, here's your chance to be part of this remarkable occasion.